Hi everyone. Real pleasure to be back here on our YouTube channel, on our podcast, and I've got such an exciting guest today, Charles Langley, and I'm going to introduce you to Charles. And I wanted to say that I met Charles very recently, only a few weeks ago in person, because Charles came on the land here at the sanctuary with Chee Ramon, one of the last Navajo medicine men, and I got to experience for a long weekend with a group of people the way traditional healing is done by Chee and in general by this tradition. And I was so amazed by it. We had a group of 15 people that I wanted to bring back Charles here on the podcast, on this recording, to share with you the immense wisdom that Charles carry, and probably get you interested to learn more about this tradition, and hopefully get you really intrigued by those ancient methods of healing. So, Charles, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Angel. Very well, and it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, me too. It's really good. Like I was saying, I got such a beautiful time with you and your wife and she and his daughter, and really happy we could connect again. So for those of you that don't know Charles, in fact, I'm going to let him introduce himself, but Charles has been a student of Chee Ramon for almost 20 years, Charles, right? You've been working with Chee.
That's correct. Well, it's nearly 20 years. Yes.
Nearly 20 years.
This year.
Yes. So Charles is not a Navajo man. He's an Englishman that came to this country a little bit over 20 years ago, but somehow ended up staying with Chee and spent a lot of time with him. And so, Charles, tell us a little bit first about your story. How did you end up coming from England here, and how did you end up on reservation with the Navajo people and with Chee?
Well, it's such a weird story. I actually wrote a book about it.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, look, essentially what happened was I was a journalist in London for many years. I worked for people like the Sunday Times, BBC. I edited encyclopedias. My last job was being night news editor of the London Evening Standard, which at the time was the largest evening newspaper in Western Europe and by quite a long way. Eventually, I reached that stage in life, which I think people do.
Hopefully, I guess. I don't know what you can say, but I guess hopefully.
Yeah, a lot of people reach it and then can't do anything about it. But I mean, I just reached that stage in life where I thought, if I stay here any longer, I'm just going to become part of the furniture, And I remember this very distinctly. I said to a colleague, look, I'm leaving, right? I'm going, and so what are you going to do? I said, I'm not the slightest idea. And this guy threw up his hands in horror and he said, but you've got a job for life. And without even thinking about it, I just heard myself saying, but I want the life. And that was one of those moments when I realized that whatever it was I was doing, and I had no idea what it was, to be honest, I was going to be doing the right thing.
You basically had not yet, you were not yet arrived on the reservation. You haven't met the Navajo. You just say, okay, I'm gone. I'm not doing that anymore. And here you are in the US, right? At some point in that story.
That's right. I mean, so shortly after that, I quit and I set off to drive across the United States, which is one of these weird things I'd always wanted to do. So I flew to Florida, bought a car, and ended up in Louisiana, in the swamps in Louisiana, where there was this wonderful French lady called Marie-Lynn Chauffe, who introduced me to these people that the French call traiteurs. Right now, that's a Cajun French word. I know I'm talking to a Frenchman, but or at least a Caucasian. At least, um, uh, a man who speaks French. It's a Cajun word, and it's a very ancient one. And these are healers from France who died out in France, as far as I know, but they still survived in the swamps, or they did at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And their roots go back to pre-Roman Gaul, actually. I mean, when I looked into this. And by that time, they were down to the very last few. And I was very fortunate to meet these gentlemen. They were about 80, 85 years old. They had no successors. They knew their day was done. And they said to me, look, we're going to give you our prayers and our power, and maybe you can do, maybe it'd be some help to some of the people of England. And I said, well, look, I don't know how to do this. I mean, look, I've only been with you one afternoon. And he just said, well, you can either do it or you can't. It's as simple as that. So I did this, and then the most bizarre thing happened. I went back to Mary Lynn's place, and it's one of those places, a B&B. There was never any B, as in breakfast. So I was searching through a cupboard all morning, desperate for something to eat, and the stuff just avalanche out on me. And the floor was covered in all this stuff. That's the only way I can describe it, stuff. And Marianne said, oh, that's presents for the Navajos. Right? Remember, I'm in the Atchafalaya swamp in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So quite far from the Navajo reservation, their territory.
It's about 1,500 miles, I think. I mean, how many Navajos have ever been to the Atchafalaya swamp? But anyway, what had happened, there was a film out then called The Wind Talkers, which was about Navajos who used their language in the Second World War as a code against the Japanese. And it was never broken because the Japanese didn't speak any Navajo. And anyway, this film had come out, and these Navajos had been... What happened was that there was a very important special services man, American Special Forces man, who lived in that area, actually, and thought it was... he retired down there. He thought it was a good idea to bring real Navajo code talkers to their Mardi Gras festival that year. Local people had collected these presents for them, but they left before they were delivered. Well, I was heading up to San Francisco, and I wanted to pick up Route 66. One look at the map showed me that Route 66, which is now the I-40, goes right past the Navajo Reservation. So I said, I'll take them. But that's the short version.
Yes, and so so there you're right. So we can say, set of circumstance, right? Set of someone seeing something new and say, hey, I guess a little bit what she might have seen in you at some point, right? That there is something there that maybe you don't know yet, that there is a possibility, and that I guess elders, people that do this work, that are really good at, pointing and seeing who can potentially be a student, right? Who can potentially learn, who can potentially unfold there. So here you are, you're on the Navajo reservation, and I want to I don't want to talk too much time on that story. So you get to meet Chee, this incredible Navajo medicine man, who's probably one of the last one now. So can you tell me a little bit about Chee, not his whole story, but who he is today and what is a Navajo medicine man? Because you just spent 20 years with him and you're still, one of his students or his main student, I guess.
His only one. I mean, it's a comment on, the very desperate situation today that the only apprentice man, Navajo medicine man that I know of is me, a white man from London. Young Navajos don't want to do it anymore. Very often they don't speak the Navajo language. I know a lot of Navajo words. I wouldn't say I could speak the language. I can usually understand what's going on. It's a very difficult language to
Mm-hmm.
speak. But anyway, the thing was that through this trip to the code talkers, who are still very, very senior men, or were at that time within the tribe, very few of them are left alive now. But 20 years ago, there was still the tribe's senior warriors. And if there was ever a parade, it was the code talkers who led them out.
Mm.
Through the code talkers, I got to meet a man called Emerson Jackson, who himself was a U.S. Army veteran. And Emerson was a very senior medicine man. He'd also been president for 12 years of the Native American Church of North America, which is the Peyote Church, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later.
Yes.
Emerson and one or two other quite senior medicine men very quickly took a shine to me, as we say in England. And I couldn't really understand why. And then one of them, it was very like the traiteurs, actually. One of them one day said to me, "Look, you may not know this, but you're one of us, and we can see that in you. And if you can stay here, you know, you will learn. So you will find somebody to teach you, and you will learn."
So,
well, I didn't think I was going to get two offers like that.
yeah, yes. And, we're talking like 20 years ago now almost. And so
right.
And I want to talk about what is a medicine man and what she's work and what the work we are doing. But
yeah,
when you look back today, thinking, we're in right now, do you understand why, or you still don't really know why?
Well, do you know, Angel, I used to tell people when they said, "Yeah, how did all this happen?" I used to say, and I meant it as actually more of a joke than anything else. I used to say, "Well, I think the spirits must have brought me here."
Mm.
Now I think there might be more truth in that than I thought at the time. I mean, look, how do you explain this whole tangled story? I mean, it's just an extraordinary thing that happened to me. It's like being hit by lightning, but not once, but several times, probably. I mean, it's just an incredibly unlikely series of events. And what made it even worse was being a journalist. I thought, well, I can write a book about this. Very interesting. And I thought, actually, I was aiming to write a work of fiction. So I thought, well, look, I'll learn a little bit about this. I'll stay for a few months, learn a little about it, and then I'll write a world bestseller. Well, after it didn't take very long to realize that what I was witnessing that was actually fact was a darn sight more interesting than anything I could ever have made up. I mean, the reality of things that were going on around me was so strange, so bizarre, so completely different than anything I'd ever known. But I eventually thought, well, look, why don't I just record this? Why don't, it's happening right in front of me. Just write it down. And that's what I did.
Yeah, so basically, it's true we have a lot of accounts of medicine people in general by journalists or anthropologists or, Western people that sometimes come and study to be with them. There is very few accounts of people that have been trained by those medicine people for such a long period of time. And especially, in that specific tradition with the Navajo people. I just want to come back just for a second, really not long, but you said Navajo people, young people, they're not really interested to get into that craft, to become potentially medicine man. And I'm sure there is some other Navajo medicine man, and I think there's none, but that is your experience, and that is the experience of Chee, who is, 80 years old now. So what is the reaction, and why Chee has had problems or difficulty to find people that were from his tribe, from his native language, that would like to embark in that type of life? What do you think it is?
Well, there are young men who would do this, and I must differentiate here for your listeners. There's a complete difference between medicine men and medicine women, right? A medicine man, a man like me, is only allowed to learn about men's medicine. That's where you get medicine men. There are medicine women that I'm not allowed to know about that as a man. All right, so that's the first thing. But there are young men who would be interested, but the problem is there's no money for it. Right? There's no money. If you're a young man, Navajo man, I don't know, 60 years ago or something, you could probably apprentice yourself to a medicine man, spend 5, 6, 7 years learning with him, and get by on what you got to eat. Right? You didn't have any debts, you didn't have any bank accounts, you didn't have any car loans. You probably lived with your. There's still a lot of multi-generation occupancy on the reservation, and there was more then. So you'd just go home and your mother would feed you. You didn't need any money. Today, the modern world has really, really impacted into the reservation. If you're a young Navajo man, you need a job. You can't apprentice yourself to a medicine man and not get paid for 7 years. If you want a girlfriend, you need some money. If you want to get married, you need some money. And so that's really what's killing it. There are young people, and I know one or two of them who probably would, 50, 60 years ago, have become medicine men. Now they can't. I mean, they're working fixing cars and things like that. Which is a great pity. And the other thing is, I mean, even in the 20 years that I've been there, there's been a huge deterioration in the language and the culture. I mean, when I first arrived, I think the statistic was 75 to 78% of Navajo people spoke their own language. Today, it's less than 25%. That's in only 20 years, right? The culture's falling away. I mean, people, even young people, have got a little idea of it, but it's fading fast. It's a tragedy, actually. It's a disaster that's been unfolding before my eyes. We don't actually know how many medicine men are left, but the best estimate this is not my estimate, by the way. The best estimate of people who know about it, probably better than me, is there maybe 4 real medicine men left, and that's on a reservation the size of Ireland. So in a country, it's like in a country the size of Ireland, you've got 4 doctors left.
Yeah, that's
Really bad.
That's really sad, and I crossed the Navajo reservation last year after stopping in Pine Ridge in South Dakota, Dakota reservation, and one of the things that strikes me every time I go is the poverty, right? The lack of access to good food, the problem with clean water, or even access to water, not even talking about clean, just access to water, right? Or electricity and basic human needs. And, with all the consequence of colonialism and the genocide that happened, there is also a lot of trauma. And so there's also, drugs and alcohol and all the problem of unresolved trauma. And that's really so sad when I'm hearing you saying, wow, there's just 4 doctors left, right? And I guess there is probably more people holding TP in general or holding sweat lodge and things like that. But would you not consider that like the medicine man that you talk about right now? And we're going to go into deeper into that.
Well, yeah, I mean, sweat lodge is just part of the culture. And most older men, can take part in the sweat lodge, and know how to run one. Things like that. And also another thing I think people should know is that Navajo medicine is a vast subject. There are ceremonies that go on for 2, 3, 4, even 5 days, These are healing ceremonies, and they are run very strictly. They have to be done absolutely correctly. Everything, every prayer, every song, every part of the ceremony has to be done properly in its proper sequence. And there are still actually a reasonable number of people who can still do this. Now, this is medicine completely different to the kind of thing Chee and I did. Right? They're more like hospital specialists. We're more like the family doctor. Right? We'll come along and fix you up. Right? But if you really, really need fixing, then you'd better go and have one of these big ceremonies, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that's completely different. That's still reasonably strong, but most of the medicine men, again, are getting very old. I mean, it's only, well, a few years ago, Chee's wife, who's now sadly departed, was desperate to get a special ceremony done for her son. And even somebody, a Navajo-speaking Navajo, connected into the medicine men's world, it took her something like 9 months to find somebody who could still do this ceremony. And we ended up right in the back of it. I mean, even by the standards of the Navajo reservation, and I know it well, this place was really the back of beyond. I mean, we ended up going up this canyon, and there was a old stone hogan at the end of it. And it was a hogan, a Navajo tradition.
Yeah, that's such a... I'm just trying to feel into what you just said, and it's really just to feel the depth of the loss, basically, that has happened.
Yes, yeah. And there's this really old guy there. He's about, I don't know how old he was, but he was well into his 80s. And his equipment was just ancient. And he was apparently the last man who could do that ceremony. And if he's still with us today, I'll be extremely surprised.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's how fast it can go. If it isn't passed on, this is oral. This is oral learning, oral teaching.
Yes.
You can't write it down. I mean, there's no way you can write it. I mean, what I've written down is kind of like a big picture. It's not all the fine details.
I mean, having witnessed it, I can understand there is very little word for that, but we'll talk about that later. I want to talk a little bit more about Chee and his work as a medicine man and your work, with him. So can you tell us a little bit about, I guess not specifics because it might be hard to describe, but what makes this type of medicine unique? And maybe, how old is this, and why nobody else can do that, or very few people can do that? What it requires really to get to this level of craft that I've witnessed that is, mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like that. So I was really, and I've seen a lot of ceremonies, a lot of medicine people in a lot of tradition. I've never seen something that detailed, that crafted, that profound, and that powerful.
Yeah. It's very powerful indeed. Well, Chee, his mother and his grandmother and his father were all medicine people. And Chee, I hope I can do this timeline for you verbally, but Chee is probably the last of the line of people who was taught by people like his father, his grandfather, his grandmother, who learned their medicine really before the white world began to impact on the Navajos. So, I mean, it's only about a 3 or 4 generation stream, and so his medicine is very pure, coming right from the roots. I've seen people attempting to do this kind of thing, and I don't know where they learned it, but it's been pretty rubbish, to be quite frank. But cheese is particularly powerful because it comes pure from the original Navajo root. And I mean, I'm committed on this. I've written this in books. I've written it in articles. I personally think this is traceable back to the last ice age. I think it goes back that far. And in fact, in one of the lectures I gave while I was with you, I fleshed that out on why I think this. But I think we have a pure stream here, which has come right from, really the very earliest times of our present humanity. And it's still with us. I mean, there will have been, some changes along the way, but I think the main drive is still with us. And I mean, if you like, do you want me to describe how this works?
Yes, I'd love to. I've witnessed, healing on almost 15 different people with different ailments, curses, cancer, depression, autism, many different things. But can you tell us a little bit kind of the bigger umbrella of that work, and then maybe getting into some specific about what the work is really about?
Okay. Well, most of what we deal with, troubles that people have, illnesses that people have, are traceable back to witchcraft. There's a lot of witchcraft on the reservation, and it's almost an everyday part of life. What we do, people will, a lot of things will be going wrong for them. Like they'll get ill with something. They'll have a car crash for no particular reason. One of the horses will break a fetlock. All this kind of thing. And it starts to pile up until one day they think, well, look, I think I may have been witched, is the word they use for it, witched. And they'll call in the medicine man. So, I mean, very few of the people we go to see we've ever heard of before. So we go down there, and she will then do a divination ceremony. And what we do is a special fireplace is erected in the center of the home. A fire is started outside. And what we need from the fire is the charcoal. So hot charcoal is then brought in. That's usually by me. It's so hot that quite often it burns the hairs off my arms, even though I'm holding it on a long-handled shovel. It's genuinely really hot, and I make that point because I think you saw that when Chee picked up that charcoal and put it in his mouth. That's demonstrating the medicine man's traditional mastery over fire. And also bringing clean breath which blows the illness away. But before we do that, he looks into the fire. I form this, as his assistant, I form this five-pointed star. A crystal is placed at the head of the star, and various instruments are laid out, including eagle feathers and fans and so on. And the medicine man will then look into the fire and divine, A, what's wrong with the patient. Is it really witchcraft? Sometimes she says, no, you've not been witched at all. This is just a run of bad luck. But usually people have been witched and a curse has been laid out. A curse has been placed on these people. Now, a Navajo curse is actually a physical object. It's not like our curses, our bell book and candle and put the fluence on people. This is kind of what they look like. This is actually one that I made.
Yes, for the people that are listening on the podcast, I want to mention that Charles is showing us what a curse would look like. That's a reproduction, basically, because the curse are destroyed when they are extracted or found. So if you are listening on the podcast, I invite you to see on the video so you can see a little bit what that looked like. Yeah.
And I'll take this apart later, Andrew, if you like, and show you what's inside it, which is always quite interesting. And these are, sometimes we find them hidden in the house, and they're hidden in, places you probably wouldn't even think of looking, such as, if somebody's got central heating, it might have been hidden behind, very few Navajo houses have central heating, by the way, but I'm going to say if they did, it may have been hidden behind the vent there. vent's been unscrewed, it's been placed inside. Sometimes they're hidden in things like waste pipes, but usually they're buried outside, usually under a window, because that's seen as the weak point where evil can enter. And remarkably, it's usually under the bedroom window of the person who's having all the trouble, the illnesses, the sicknesses, the car crashes, etc. Our job then is to take this out, take it apart, show the people what's in there. So there's no question of going around and saying, oh, we found a curse, but we dealt with it and you're okay now. We actually show them. And these things are sort of buried. Very typically, they've been there for years by the time we get to them. Sometimes they're buried a long way off. That's less usual. But perhaps I can tell this story. I was with Chee one day, and we were looking for a curse, and he couldn't quite figure out where it was, but he knew it wasn't at the house. We piled into a truck and drove off into the country. And, you can drive cross country to one place in the Navajo reservation. There are no roads, but you can drive across the desert. We came to the top of a hill, and she said, stop the truck. We looked around, and he said, is there a graveyard around here somewhere? And the two men from the house who'd come with us said, yes, it's over that hill. You couldn't see it. So we went to this graveyard, and Navajo graveyards, not like Western graveyards, they very rarely have headstones. Some do. If they're veterans, sometimes they have a headstone. Usually they don't. Typically they don't. There's just a pile of earth, like you see in Wild West movies where someone's been buried, there's just a pile of earth. That's what you see. And we're going up and down these graves, and suddenly she just dived on this grave, dug into it, and pulled out a curse. And the men who were with us were just aghast. They said, but that's our mother's grave. And of course, it had been buried in her grave to make the curse more powerful. And the reason we'd been called in the first place is because the grandmother was very ill. The curse seemed to be aimed at the women of the family. The mother had died, the grandmother was now very ill. And she'd been to 3 hospitals, including the big hospital in Albuquerque, which is 200 or more miles away. And every time they said, look, take her home, make her comfortable, there's nothing we can do. She hadn't eaten for 3 weeks. By the time we got back to the house, she was sitting there eating with a spoon, eating a can of Campbell's soup. And her other daughter said, well, I don't know what's going on. My mother just suddenly said she was hungry. And that was probably about the moment we pulled that curse out. So that's how powerful it can be, and I've witnessed this. A lot of people.
Yeah, I'm sure you've seen many of them, and thank you for giving such a powerful example. I've witnessed curses and things happening in the Amazon between medicine men, kind of trying to steal power from each other, to even harm or make them heal and potentially kill them. So that's a big part of what's happening potentially on the reservation there. And I'd love that you show us what is in the curse, but what is the explanation of Chee on that? You would think that people, is it because they are jealous? Is it because they envy? Is it just because it's been here for a very long time and people still keep doing it? It always surprised me, when I hear about those stories, right? But what is Chee outlook on that? It's just like, well, this is our life is right here.
I think that is to some extent it. This is the way that we live our lives. As I said, witchcraft is still a very powerful and potent factor on the reservation. I mean, look, we live in a world. Most people are going to be watching this. Live in a world where the very idea of witchcraft is just simply laughed at. I mean, to be modern, you can't possibly believe in witchcraft. I mean, ridiculous. But actually, we're only a couple of generations away, actually, from a time when people did almost universally, well, more than a few generations, but a couple of 100 years from a time when people almost universally believed in witchcraft. Yeah, from top to bottom. I often cite the case of Shakespeare's play Macbeth, which he actually wrote for King James I, who was so fascinated by witchcraft, he wrote books about it. You know, you remember the witches, the weird sisters in Macbeth, and it opens with these prophecies and so on. When that play was first performed before King James and I think his cousin, who was the King of Denmark in London, I think it was about 1610, I can pretty well guarantee you that everybody in that audience, including all the cast, and the king, and the queen, and all the lords, all believed in witchcraft.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they all do. We are weird in human history by not believing it at all, or trying not to, but I see demonstrations of it all the time.
Yeah, and you give us a powerful example, and I'm sure you have plenty of them. So I won't kind of finish and close that subject. Can you show us what's inside usually, or what does it look like again?
Yes,
Maybe you can
I
describe it as you open it so people listening on the podcast can have an idea.
Usually when we get these, they're black with age. This is rawhide, and it's been wrapped up with rawhide. This is the string around it. Okay, and this is typically how they appear. So let me just quickly unwrap this. I'll just hold this up so you can see. And if I take the covering off, should I tip this forward a bit, Angel, so people can see it a bit better? Is that? No,
that's okay. We can see.
We'll put it back. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I open this up now, you'll see inside there's a stick. Yeah. There's also this, which is an arrowhead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's animal fur. Now, typically, this will be bear fur or deer fur. The reason for that is bears are taboo in our homes. If you meet one or even cross a bear track, you're supposed to go and get a protection ceremony done. And when I inquire about this, and it's always been a bit unsatisfactory actually, the medicine man will say, well, if you go near a bear, you'll get very ill. You have to stay away from it. I think there may be something lacking in translation here, but bears can also contain the evil spirits of people. So that will be put in the curse, bear fur or deer hair. The deer hair is to send you crazy. You know how a startled deer goes charging through the undergrowth?
Mm-hmm.
That's to make you crazy like that. Okay, so inside here we've got this stick, which has also been wrapped up with hide, with raw hide. Let me just take this off as quickly as I can here. And it looks like a stick. But when you look at it carefully, it comes in half.
Oh, okay. With carving.
And inside, I don't know if you can see that.
Yes.
Right? On the, I'm not sure how you're going to look at it. On the left hand, I put it upside down, actually.
Yeah, we can see it.
Right? On this side here, you've got a man and a lightning strike.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that the lightning would go, if there's lightning, it would be diverted into it and cause him pain.
Mm-hmm.
Here we have what's supposed to be a rattlesnake. You can possibly see the forked tongue.
Yes. And a house.
And a hogan, yes, a house, yeah. On the other side of the stick, I don't know if you can have clues. That's not too bad, is it?
Yes.
We have a similar thing. We have a rattlesnake. we have a lightning strike, but the figure here is a female figure. And there's also a dollar sign. The idea is, if you're a man and a wife, okay, or, two lovers, this will split you apart. Okay, I've got it the wrong way around. This will split you apart. And the house there and the money, right? It's to drain all the money out of your house. It's to start you fighting over money, to start you fighting over the house. Yeah? Now, the arrowhead that I was holding up, it's a stone arrowhead. It's typical of the kind of things we find. This was not found in a curse, by the way. So this is one that's been produced somewhere on the reservation. What they curse with, this is typical, is something broken, a stick, and something sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Something broken, something sharp is the basic concept of a Navajo curse. And these turn up all over the place. I mean, God knows how many hundreds of them we've dug up. And, when I first started, I thought, oh, well, Chee must be, jumping on his bicycle or something and bicycling around the reservation at night and burying curses just so, he can dig them up. Well, I was soon cured of that when he started telling me to dig them up because he had a bad back. So I started digging them up for him. So I knew that was genuine. I also knew that as we were traveling sometimes 200 miles or more to get some to people we'd never heard of and never met, look, the answer is there's plenty of real witches going around planting curses. Medicine men don't need to plant phony ones themselves.
Yeah, so thank you for showing that. It's really powerful, and I want to make sure our listeners are not just hearing about curses today, but also about other things, because I've seen also Chee doing extraction from people, and I want to preserve the confidentiality of the people involved, but people have cancer or autism or other things, and there is this technique that she's using this little piece of wood and sucking out from people those elements. And I've seen it with my eyes, right? Taking out things that are impossible to find, I guess, in a normal body or in a pipe. And can you just talk very quickly for a few minutes just about that technique? Because that's another powerful one.
Yeah. Well, the idea is that the witch man, basically Navajos will tell you the witch man can do anything. And one of the things they do is they implant things in you. All sorts of, make you very ill. And the medicine man then removes that. Chee will remove this. He'll do a divination ceremony. He'll figure out what's wrong with you. Sometimes there isn't a curse, the physical curse I've just shown you. Sometimes we would say in English, you have been cursed, right? But this is physical stuff that's been injected into you by the medicine, by the witch man without you knowing. And the medicine man then has to remove it. And she does this with a pipe. It's actually a reed in Navajo. They call it, in the English translation, they call it bamboo, but it's not really. It's a kind of local reed that grows out there. And they extract it with this. And these are physical things. Well, you saw them when he pulled them out of some people when we came over there. It's illness, things like a lady had some kind of blockage, intestinal blockage, and she pulled that out for her. People who've got really bad joint pains and things. Sometimes something's being injected in there by the witch man, and he will find it and pull it out. I remember very closely with a man who had, he was losing the sight of this eye. She came right in here with his tube, and he pulled this stuff out the guy's eye. And almost immediately, the man said, look, it's improving. I'm starting to see again. I had seen people not walk into Chee's, actually being carried in because, it's so, their feet is so painful they can't walk. Chee's worked on them, and they'd actually walked out of there. I mean, almost danced out of the place. And, in our world, I think I said to you, and I think I should be honest to people who are watching and listening, I always try to keep one foot in the scientific community, the scientific world. I want to see evidence. Well, when somebody has to be carried in and then virtually dances out again, unfortunately I'm not a doctor and I have no way of explaining this in medical terms. But, you don't have to be a doctor to know when somebody's made an extraordinary recovery. In the family.
And I've witnessed that when you were here. I want to mention that to people here. There was, a child that came that's around 5 years old that had autism that hasn't spoken, yet. And she worked on him and told the mother that was here with a dear friend, say, hey, your child is going to speak in a few days, start speaking. He has never spoken in so many years. And as of today, which is kind of 2 weeks now after this retreat, the child is not only speaking words, which he has never done before, but he's even singing. So I've witnessed it, obviously I believe in it. I'm quite immersed in that work, but it is true that probably you are listening today on the podcast or you are watching this video. We're not going to go into explanation, but just saying that I've seen enough of it that, if I had to hear about it 20 years ago before I got into that work, I would have probably think this is just coincidence. This is just what we call miraculous healing. This is just what, some kind of witchcraft which doesn't exist. There is a scientific explanation, which there might be, by the way. But what I've seen goes way, way beyond all of that. And for me, it's like there is not even a possibility to explain that working on someone with a little piece of bamboo and extracting piece of black glass, like literally black glass from someone's body without opening the body. So I don't want to, give too much details about that, but just, to keep our mind open, I think it's very important when we are witnessing ancestral healing and to be curious. And, at the end of the day, those people are working out healed. And that's really, I think, what matters and what's really important. And people that, like we said, I've been to big hospitals sometime. I've been told, well, you're going to die very quickly and very soon, and then just start recovering. So that's, I think, what's the best testimony we can get from that type of healing, right?
Well, Angel, I didn't, because we left when we did, I didn't actually know that the little boy had recovered that much. I'm not surprised. Quite honestly, I've never happened before. But I'm very pleased, and I'll certainly tell Chee about it. One thing I would say about these extractions is I have done this myself. With the divination ceremony, the reading things in the fire, I'm extremely good at that. I mean, I see well for an Indian, let alone for a white man. I've also done these extractions, and the idea behind it, the philosophy, if that's the right word, is that the spirits are doing this, not the man. Mm-hmm. And I always remember the first time I did it, I had this patient, this young Navajo man, I'll never forget his name, he's called Brett. And he had a sore leg, and he hadn't been able to walk properly for a year. And he came into the sweat, and she suddenly just turned to me and said, "You do it." This is the first time I'd ever done this. And I remember being horrified. What on earth am I going to do? I was seeing it done, I've never done it. And it was interesting, all the Navajos there, they'd never seen a white man do this before. They'd never even heard of a white man trying to do it. It didn't faze them at all, because their view was, well, if the spirits are prepared to help him, he can do it. And if they're not prepared to help him, he can't. Simple as that. I'm having stage fright and palpitations and such, but they didn't care less. They thought, well, he can do it or he can't. If the spirits are going to help this white man, great. So I did it, and I pulled this big thorn out of his leg. And I can absolutely assure your viewers and listeners, there was no trick involved. I mean, I sucked away. I didn't actually believe I could do it, and then there it was. And the guy's leg was cured almost instantaneously. But the weird thing was, I felt completely in pieces. I felt totally shattered. I just had to get out of the place, and as I drove off, Brett is dancing around the sweat lodge, showing everybody. And I'm feeling in pieces. And I talked to Chee about it afterwards. And she said, well, what do you expect? The spirit's coming to you. Of course you're going to feel strange. You're going to have to get used to it. What do you feel? What do you expect? Which is strange that, after I've been there a few years by then, nobody ever explained that to me, And it is true. It's not the man doing it. Chee Ramon is not pulling stuff out of people. Charles Langley does not pull things out of people or divine things in fires. Something comes into you and it works through you. And I think that's the best explanation I can give. And the matter that we actually pull out of people, it's there, but it doesn't manifest itself. It doesn't become physical so we as humans can see it. Until the spirits have allowed you to take it out, then we can see it. And as you know yourself, this is real physical stuff. It's not us saying, "Oh, we pulled something out of you. There you are. Very good. Off you go." We actually
in the case of that little boy, he extracted something from the throat, but walking through the skin of the neck, right? And the extraction was, the thing was at least a couple of inches. It was pretty big what was removed. And the mother messaged me 3 days later, sending me a video of him singing. I was
still happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I was not, it's not like I was surprised because I know, and I've witnessed Chee at work, but it was just a beautiful testimony to see that little boy that was not able to speak and just discover speech, right? Having speech coming for the first time. So I want to kind of close on that because I want to take some time to talk a little bit about this recording that you've done with your book. So she's now 80 plus years old, right?
As far as we know, yes. His birth is a bit hazy.
I'm going to say that too. You're not, very young, Charles. You're younger than 80. You're not 80, but you're not a young lad, right? You're not in your 20s.
No, not anymore. No.
So, obviously, those learning and those ways, takes many years of immersion, a lifetime potentially of immersion in those culture and those tradition. To learn, because like you say, we can't really explain how to do it. We really have to be immersed in it and communicate. I've witnessed Chee because he was staying in my home, spending many, many hours every night just talking to the stars, being out looking at the stars and being in prayers and communion. And that's his ritual, that's his ways. And I want to ask you a little bit just to close on that subject. So this is going to potentially disappear. But given it is given by spirit, right, potentially that is always there, is there any time where you talk to Chee where she believes that potentially that medicine might die and come back because it can be relearned a certain way? Or does he feel like really people need to learn now because we lose the human aspect of it that might disappear completely potentially?
I wish I could answer that in the affirmative. I think Chee and I both know that that's not going to happen. Um, I would I would say within 10 years, this is probably going to be dead.
Hmm.
She's one of the last practitioners. I mean, what I've managed to do is, over the years, over a very long period of time, 20 years, I wrote down at length. I mean, this is the kind of thing a journalist does, right? I mean, it's natural to me.
That's when your first skill, your first job is coming handy now again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I wrote, no, I didn't write down everything we did, but I mean, the things that were worth recording, I recorded in detail. I mean, I would typically come back from, a de-witching or something like that, and I'd write 3, 4, 5,000 words about it to get down that detail. Before it went, and I'd do it straight away. Over the years, I mean, it's added up to a work of about 500,000, 500,000 words, which is nearly as long as War and Peace for any viewers or listeners who've ever had to wade their way through Tolstoy. I mean, it's marvelous stuff, but it's rather long. Excuse me, Mum. Do you know I can't get a publisher?
Yeah, so those are probably like 1,000-page, right? It's going to be a big volume. What was your intention when you started recording? What is mainly for your personal education? Because you were learning that, or what? Did you always have the goal like, oh, one day she's going to be gone, I might be gone, and someone needs to know about this?
I think it was a mixture of them all, actually. I think when I started doing it, I just wanted to write it down because it was so remarkable. I thought, look, if I don't write this down, nobody else is going to. And then I think eventually I got around to thinking, well, look, I need to record as much of this as I can while I'm still able to do so, while there's still somebody who can do it. And then eventually, as you made the point, I'm not getting any younger either. And I realized, well, if I, what in England we say, slip on a banana skin or fall under a bus or something like that, then all this will have been for nothing. So I tried to get a publisher.
Do you have a title for the book already? Do you have a title for it?
It's just called the Navajo. It's just called the Navajo Diaries, and I mean it's in diary form. It's name, place, time, date, and then what happened.
So I'm quite fascinated. You told me that when you were here. Hey, I can't find a publisher. Like people are not really interested about that kind of thing. To me, it's mesmerizing, right? Because you would think that some of those. There's a lot of spiritual publisher or publisher that publish works that is a little bit out there, right? A little bit different from mainstream. What is just quickly on that, but what is the reason people are not really interested in that kind of work?
Do you know, Angel, I haven't the slightest idea. Like you, I would have thought they would be interested. But I mean, I've contacted, altogether, I would say about 150 agents and publishers, and not one of them, not only in this country, but in Britain as well, and not one of them showed any interest of any kind. I mean, the 2 books that I have out on Amazon are kind of cuts. I cut interesting bits out and stitch them all together. And I'm very honest about that in the books. I mean, I tell people right from the start that that's what we've done, what I've done. So anyway, look, eventually I thought, well, look, if I fall under the bus, all this is going to be for nothing. So I'm having it privately printed in London. We're going to print up maybe, I mean, it's a 2-volume work, so we're going to print up maybe 100 volumes altogether.
Yeah, so we'll put the links for people about your other book, right? We put the links there so people can, find your other books and all of that.
Okay, yeah.
And I also want to, just put it out there. If there's anyone that's listening to this podcast today or in a month, or listening to this YouTube, or someone in a publishing house and you're interested to learn more about that, to contact me or to contact Charles. And, because I think, well, obviously this is not going to be lost because you're printing it, personally, but I think there will be a beautiful impact to have this wisdom share more broadly and to really reach more people. So that's what I believe. So Charles, I want to give you the last 4 or 5 minutes. I don't know if there's anything we haven't talked about. I'm really fascinated by it. I just want to say that this is such a huge subject. We could do many chapters of that discussion, and I might invite you again to talk about a slightly variation of that subject in a few months. But we are here in 2020, right? We're going into 2030. 10 years from now, probably she's gone, right? 20, 30 years from now, anybody that's known she probably will be gone. So what can we do? Is that people listening, is there anything that can be done to really support? Obviously there's a lot of work done around taking land back, territories back. There's a lot of work done around language. I know, there's schools and some teaching done around the language, but around the medicine work here, is there anything that she or you sees as, that would really help? Or do you feel like really this is just, the end of a cycle and it's going to be really hard to preserve that type of medicine? Well, and once again, there's many other ceremonies, many other type of medicine. You talk quickly about peyote and that, and this is still going. But that kind of work, what can we do? Or how can we support? Or, what is to be done? So if we want to preserve some part of it at least.
Well, I think it is the end of the cycle. If you look everywhere else around the world, it's over. Even into the 1920s in Britain and in the United States, there were still what I used to call cunning folk, who were kind of folk healers. That's all gone now. The only people who are left of the old folk healer type are the ones we now call horse whisperers. They're still clinging on. But if you look around the world, all this stuff is dying everywhere. In Asia, in Australia, in Europe, everywhere you look, it's dying. And I think, and I'm very sad to say this, I think we've reached the end of the cycle among the Navajo. After Chee and one or two others, there's just a big black hole. There's nobody coming up. I have done everything I can to record and memorialize as much as I can of the kind of thing that happened. What we did, what we were able to achieve, etc. Unfortunately, you could read every word of the 500,000 words that I've recorded in 2 volumes and still not be able to conduct a Navajo ceremony.
Yes,
because there's so many bits and pieces that you can only learn by observation. And, you can't actually write it down. It's not like a formula. It's not like, if you're putting together, you're a pharmacist and you're putting things together.
It's not like do this and do that and this will happen, right? It's a little bit more complex.
Yeah, press the button and everything will be fine. It just isn't like that. And without a teacher, you can't really learn it. And I think, it's a weird thing to say, but the way things are going, this white man from North London could end up as possibly one of the last Navajo medicine men. I would hope that doesn't happen. I really do hope that doesn't happen, because you really need to be a Navajo to fully understand this. And some, quite prominent Navajos have paid me the huge compliment saying that Charles Langley is the only white man we've ever met who actually understands our ways, and that's a massive compliment. I mean, I couldn't tell you how pleased I was when they started saying that about me. And I can do this stuff, but I'm no spring chicken either, and I've not got anyone to pass it on to. So I think what we're going to end up with is that my books are going to be the last memorial. I mean, there'll be copies in the British Library, there'll be copies in the Library of Congress, the Bodleian Library in, I can't remember if it's Oxford or Cambridge now, I think it's Oxford. These great world libraries will have copies, and so hopefully it will live on in that form. But as for actual practitioners, I don't think so. I think it's the end of the line. I'm very sad to say.
Yeah, and I thank you, Charles, for being very honest. Americans love, happy ending movies or happy ending stories, but I think sometimes, it can make us live in total illusion of reality, because not always stories end that way. And I think, hopefully, it will interest people in those traditional ways. But more importantly, I think try to preserve what else is to be preserved, right? Lands, culture, language. And supporting, we'll put that in the details below, but we'll put some non-profit and organizations that are already doing amazing work on the ground with the people on the reservation that help them, with food, with water, with shelter, with, many necessary things. I wanted to give you a big thank you, Charles. I've been so pleased to meet you and to get to know you a little bit better. Thank you for sharing with all your heart and, being willing to do that and to bring that out there. We will stay in touch. If anyone here that's listening or watching, if you have any question and things like that, don't hesitate to reach out. Obviously, if we get 100 emails, I might not pass everything to Charles, but if there's a few things that I feel, hey, Charles and Chee need to hear about, we'll transmit that. I also wanted to mention that Chee's not on the call because he doesn't speak very good English. He speaks very little English. Obviously, he speaks Navajo. And that's the reason why, it's happening that way. And like Charles explained, Navajo language is very complex. Hence the code people, talkers during World War II were used with that language. And it's also, I think, for me, a tribute and an honor to that culture. And this is one view, one version, one opinion or two opinions here. You might find other opinions on the medicine, on the evolution of that. But I can only tell you that, Charles is, the closest student of Chee and that extraordinary man. And he spent, more than 20 years with him now. And so you got quite a accurate account, as close as we can, right, to what's happening and what's being done.
Yeah.
Charles, any words that you want to close with?
Yes, I mean, I think first of all, Angel, thank you for having me on. I'm glad we could come round and actually demonstrate to people who have an understanding, at your center, what we can actually do. I'm very glad we were able to show them. This is basically the first time Chee's ever been off the reservation. It's certainly the first time he's ever demonstrated these powers to an outside non-Indian audience. And so I was very pleased we could achieve that. So there are people who know that this is real now, not just hearing about it secondhand. They actually witnessed it. I think at the moment we're still hanging on there. For another few years we'll probably be still hanging on there. But one thing Chee actually did once say to me, and I was talking about Navajo medicine, and he bent down, he just scooped up a fistful of sand from the desert, right? And he held it out and he just let it all drain away until there were just, a few grains stuck to his fingers. And he said, what you just saw me pour away used to be Navajo medicine. And he pointed to the desert, and it was all as vast as that. And then he held up his hand with the grains on it and said, "That's all we have left." I am just enormously privileged to have been able to take part in that, even if it was only the last few grains. It's been an enormous privilege. It's been the most important thing in my life, in a life which actually has not been notably short of dramatic events of one kind or another. But I mean, that's by far the most important thing I've ever done is record what she can do. And other Navajo medicine men, I work with other medicine men as well, that I've been able to record that is a privilege. And I'm enormously proud that I was able to do it and that it will be there in the future. If people want to get interested, they want to know what a medicine man actually really did, they will be able to find it in my work. And with that, I'm very, very proud and pleased.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Charles. Thank you, everyone that was listening. Always a privilege to connect. We might try to bring back Chee at some point, next year, maybe in the spring. So you might have, the possibility to meet him in person and to experience this beauty that I can't describe than just an immense beauty and power of this work. But in the meantime, if you want to reach out, don't hesitate to contact us on our website. You will find below this podcast and below this video some links about Charles and his books, some links that I mentioned about some amazing people that do great work on the reservation that you can support if you want to send them some donation. And wishing everyone a wonderful rest of your evening or your day, wherever you're watching from. Please share this podcast with others. This is a free content, so we really rely on just spreading the good words. If you can do that, that would be amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, and see you again soon.
Thank you very much.